Have you ever noticed how the people who are most desperate to be liked are often the ones who command the least respect? There's something deeply ironic about this. We've all encountered that person who tries too hard, who bends themselves into impossible shapes seeking approval, who laughs a little too eagerly at every joke. And what happens? They fade into the background. They become forgettable, invisible. Now think about the opposite. Think about someone who walked into a room and commanded instant attention without saying a word. Someone whose presence alone shifted the energy. Someone who didn't seem to care whether you liked them or not, and paradoxically, that made them impossible to ignore. What separated these two people? What invisible force made one forgettable and the other unforgettable? The answer lies in a truth that makes most people deeply uncomfortable. Respect and affection are not the same currency. In fact, they often exist in opposition to each other. The moment you begin chasing someone's affection is the moment you surrender your power to them. You become predictable, manageable, safe. And safety, contrary to what we've been taught, does not inspire respect. It inspires indifference. The uncomfortable reality is that people don't respect you because they like you. They respect you because some part of them understands that underestimating you, dismissing you, or crossing you would be a mistake. That calculation happens beneath conscious thought, in the primitive part of the brain that still evaluates threat and power in every social interaction. Most of us spend our entire lives doing everything backwards. We seek validation from others, measuring our worth by their smiles, their approval, their affection. We adjust our behavior, soften our edges, dim our light, all in the desperate hope that others will like us. And we tell ourselves that if they like us enough, respect will naturally follow. But it doesn't work that way. It has never worked that way. The person who needs approval has already lost. They've revealed their weakness, their vulnerability, their dependence. And human nature, being what it is, cannot help but exploit weakness when it appears. Not out of cruelty necessarily, but simply because it's there. People push against boundaries that yield. They dismiss those who seem too eager to please. They take for granted anyone who makes themselves constantly available. What would happen if you stopped? What if you completely severed your emotional dependence on others' opinions of you? Not in a theatrical way, not by loudly proclaiming you don't care, but in a deep, genuine detachment. Imagine walking into every room knowing with absolute certainty that their judgment of you is irrelevant to your sense of self-worth. That you won't change your stance, your behavior, or your decisions based on whether they approve. That you are the only person whose validation matters. This isn't arrogance. Arrogance is loud and desperate in its own way, constantly seeking to prove superiority. This is something else entirely. This is the quiet certainty of someone who has removed themselves from the emotional marketplace where others trade in approval and judgment. The moment you stop needing affection, something shifts. People sense it immediately, even if they can't articulate what's changed. You become unpredictable in their eyes. They can't figure out what you want from them, which means they can't manipulate you using the usual social currencies. Their smiles don't sway you. Their disapproval doesn't shake you. You operate according to principles they can't quite decipher, which makes you dangerous in a way that compels respect. Think about the leaders, the figures throughout history who commanded genuine respect rather than mere popularity. Were they the ones desperately seeking approval? Were they the ones who apologized and explained themselves constantly? No, they were the ones who established clear boundaries and lived by them regardless of others' reactions. They were the ones who made it clear that respect was not freely given, but had to be earned. They were the ones who understood that detachment from emotional need is the foundation of all power. But here's where it gets interesting. This detachment doesn't mean becoming cold or unfeeling. It's not about shutting down your emotions or treating others with cruelty. It's about taking complete control over your emotional responses, ensuring that your interactions stem from strategic thinking rather than desperate need. When you no longer measure yourself by others' feelings toward you, when you stop contorting yourself to fit their expectations, you automatically position yourself above the petty emotional dynamics that control most people's lives. You become someone operating on a different frequency, and that difference is what commands attention and breeds respect. The question isn't whether people like you. The question is whether they can afford to dismiss you. And when the answer is no, when they understand on some level that you are a force that must be acknowledged, that's when respect flows toward you, naturally, inevitably, without you having to chase it or beg for it or compromise yourself to obtain it. So the real question becomes, are you ready to stop seeking approval and start commanding respect? The secret to unforgettable presence lies not in what you reveal, but in what you withhold. Every room you enter, every person you engage with, you leave an impression. But most people leave the wrong kind of impression. They dissolve into the background because they've given everything away immediately. They've shown all their cards, revealed all their thoughts, made themselves completely predictable, and therefore completely forgettable. The person who masters presence understands that mystery is magnetic, that scarcity creates value, that the unknown is far more compelling than the familiar. When you walk into a space, does the energy shift? Do people become subtly aware of your movements even when you say nothing? This isn't about being loud or demanding attention through force. It's about carrying yourself with such self-assurance that your presence alone becomes an event worth noting. True presence comes from absolute certainty in your own completeness. You don't need to chase conversations or force yourself into discussions. You don't need to fill silence with nervous chatter. You exist in the space with full confidence that you belong there, that your presence itself is enough. This kind of self-assurance isn't taught in schools or discussed in polite company, but it's the foundation of all personal power. When you believe you are already complete, others begin to believe it too. They start taking you seriously, and that seriousness transforms into respect without you having to demand it. But presence requires strategy. You must carefully manage how and when you reveal yourself. Don't give everything away at once. Keep people intrigued, questioning, slightly off balance. When you speak, say only what's necessary. Make every word count. Your gestures, your tone, your silences, they should all reinforce the idea that you are someone worth paying attention to, someone whose time and energy are valuable resources not to be wasted. The most powerful people in any room are often the quietest. They observe, they listen. They don't feel compelled to dominate conversations because their presence speaks volumes without words. Silence becomes their weapon, creating space that others rush to fill, often revealing more than they intend. This silence gives you control over the tempo of interactions, shifting focus back to you without any obvious effort. People begin to wonder what you're thinking, why you're so composed, what you'll do next. That curiosity breeds respect because they can't categorize you easily. You become a puzzle they're compelled to solve, but never quite can. Your body language reinforces this power. Someone who slouches or fidgets broadcasts insecurity, but someone who stands tall, moves with purpose, maintains steady eye contact, commands attention effortlessly. Your body is a tool for influencing perception. Learn to use it to convey strength, control, and focus. Every movement should reinforce your power, never detract from it. Predictability is where power goes to die. When people know exactly how you'll react, what you'll say, how you'll behave, they know how to control you. They can push your buttons, manipulate your responses, use you as a pawn in their games. The moment you become predictable is the moment you lose all leverage and authority. To maintain respect, you must remain an enigma. This doesn't mean acting erratically or irresponsibly. It means making decisions that others can't easily understand or anticipate. Sometimes you're generous when they expect harshness. Other times you show restraint when they expect retaliation. This calculated unpredictability keeps people off balance, unable to reduce you to a simple pattern. They can never be certain what you'll do next, and that uncertainty creates psychological tension that keeps them cautious. They respect you not because they like you, but because they can't afford not to. They understand on a subconscious level that underestimating you could be costly. The greatest weapon in your arsenal is restraint. Restraint in speech, in action, in emotion. Most people spill everything, desperately filling silences, explaining themselves endlessly, reacting immediately to every provocation. This makes them weak and easily manipulated. But when you hold back, when you withhold your thoughts and emotions, you create a void that others cannot penetrate. They're left guessing about your motivations, your next move, your true feelings. This ambiguity forces respect because they understand they cannot control or predict you. You're not desperate for attention or validation. You don't need to engage in their games, their gossip, their petty battles. By exercising restraint, you demonstrate that you're not easily moved, not easily swayed, not easily controlled. Silence, when wielded correctly, becomes more powerful than any words. It disrupts expectations and forces others to listen not to what you say, but to your presence itself. When you speak, your words carry weight because they're not diluted by constant chatter. Every statement becomes significant because it's deliberate and purposeful. People learn that when you open your mouth, it's worth paying attention. This selective communication multiplies the impact of your words exponentially. The person who talks constantly loses all power in their speech. But the person who speaks rarely, but with precision, commands attention every time. Remember, you don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Your mere presence should be sufficient to assert your authority. Sometimes the greatest show of power is choosing not to engage at all. When you remove yourself from the situation, it forces acknowledgement that you're not someone who can be trifled with. It signals that you exist above their petty concerns. This withdrawal isn't retreat, it's a strategic demonstration of your independence from their judgment and their games. The path to respect without affection requires you to fundamentally reimagine your relationship with power. Stop measuring yourself by others' feelings toward you. Stop contorting yourself to fit their expectations. Embrace detachment, master presence, cultivate unpredictability, and wield silence as your weapon. When you do, respect will flow toward you, not because you've demanded it, but because you've made it impossible for others to withhold it. You'll become unforgettable, not because you were pleasant, but because you left an indelible mark on their understanding of power itself.